In our lives today, most of us have the same issue. That is that there's not enough hours in the day to do everything that you want to do, right? We all kind of struggle with this idea of, how do we get everything done that we want to do? Good things, aren't they? Most of the things that we are doing, they're good things. And yet we don't have enough time to get everything done. And so sometimes things of urgent nature become more important than things that are very important, but they're not as urgent. And that's what we're talking about this morning. In Luke chapter 5 and verse 12, Jesus has been going along and he's teaching. And while he's teaching, people are coming to him to be healed. Now, which one is more important? To learn about God or to be able to walk? Now, to the person who is lame, they might say, well, it would be more important to me to be able to walk. But in reality, we all know the most important thing is our relationship with God. But the urgent sometimes becomes more important at that moment than the things that are really important. And that's what we're seeing here. In verse 12 of Luke chapter 5, he starts off, while Jesus was in one of the towns, a man came along who was covered with leprosy. This morning in our class, we were talking about Nahum. Nahum was a man in the Old Testament who was a leper. Now, leprosy was something that was different today than it would have been then. Today there is actually some cures or at least some treatments for leprosy. But back in that day, there were no treatments. And leprosy was a disease that deteriorated the body. It actually was a nerve problem. The nerves would quit responding. You would hurt yourself or get damaged, and you didn't even know it. I've heard people tell stories about picking up hot pans and not knowing that they were scalding themselves. Things like that. People would walk and in the process of walking, they would damage their foot and it would get all infected, but they didn't even know it was damaged. Those kind of things would happen because of the nerve damage. There was also a problem that the damage to the skin would cause it to begin to die. So the skin would turn white and it would have a chalky look to it, kind of a flaky look to the skin. So that's how people knew that you had leprosy. In that day and age, because there was no cure for it, people were very afraid of catching it. They thought it would be passed on by touch. So they made a law, that if you had leprosy, that you had to declare that as you walked through town, as you were among people. You would have to declare, leper, so that people would know that. Now, the question in my mind comes, how would that make you feel? During COVID, we all kind of experienced this feeling of, do I shake somebody's hand? Do I hug them? If I cough, oh boy, that the whole world's coming down then, All of these things that happened when we were in COVID, and we all felt that. But what if you were the only one? What if in the community you were the only one that everybody was shunning, that nobody wanted to get close to, that you were the one that had to yell out that you're a leper, stay away? How would that impact your life? What kind of things would come out of that in your life? Luke was a physician. We don't know exactly what that means. I believe he probably had some kind of a practice as a doctor of some sorts, but they called him the great physician. Or the physician. He calls Jesus the great physician. But here in verse 12, I wonder if he's not thinking of this from the perspective of a doctor and somebody that I can't cure him. I can't heal him. I have no way of doing these things. So he would have known these things. But here he goes and he says in the second part of verse 12, when he saw Jesus, he fell with his face to the ground and he begged him, "Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean." Two things come out of that statement that he made. First of all, he was humble. He recognized that he was begging for his life. And he's asking Jesus to heal him. But the way he said it shows that he had great faith. Because he says, I know that if you are willing, that you can heal me. And so he says, if you are willing, you can heal me. And he begs him to heal him. Desperate. Somebody that is really needing this help. But listen to Jesus' response in verse 13. Jesus reached out his hand and he touched the man. When do you think the last time that this man had been touched? If he has to declare that he is a leper, no one would come close to him. The crowds would part as he would walk into town. They would try to avoid him. And Jesus touches him and says, I am willing. What a neat reaction. What an awesome way to respond. I am willing, he said, be clean. And immediately the leprosy left him. I don't know, I've never really been involved in the spiritual healings and things like that. But if somebody was instantly healed like this, if they were unable to walk and instantly they were up walking and jumping and leaping and praising God, that would be pretty impressive to me. If somebody had leprosy and immediately their skin was clean and pure, that would be pretty impressive. Jesus touches him and says, I am willing, be clean. And that's it. All of a sudden, he's clean. What a wonderful story that would have made. But listen to what happens. Then Jesus ordered him, don't tell anyone. Wait a minute. If I was able to do a miracle like this, if I was able to heal somebody and instantly they were better, I'd want everybody to know, wouldn't you? Wouldn't that be cool to be able to say, hey, looky what I did? But that's not what Jesus does. There's two reasons why I believe he doesn't do this. If he was to do that, he would be inundated, buried under people who are wanting his attention, wanting him to heal, wanting him to do these miracles for them. So that's one reason. But also, he says, it is not my time yet. It's not yet my time. And what does that mean? There is something better coming. And he doesn't want to lose that focus. But he tells him, he says, but go show yourself to the priest and offer the sacrifices that Moses commanded for your cleansing as a testimony to them. So there was something that occurred whenever someone would go through a time of impurity. Sometimes that impurity was caused by infections, things that happened to them, cycles, whatever the thing was that they were going through. And then they would have to have a 7 days of purity, cleansing, to make them pure and holy. For the leper, they were not allowed to come into the city, so they would go outside of the city with the priest. And the priest would come out and would hear what was said, perform some sacrifices. And as I understand it, one source that I looked at referenced that there would be 2 birds. There would be one that would be killed and sacrificed. The second bird, they would take the blood of the first bird, sprinkle it on it, and then release the bird into the wild. And that was taking the sins away. So this is what, something like that would have been what this man would have gone through. But the key to it is, it really wasn't for this man's benefit because he had already been cleansed. God already healed him. And he says, be clean. So he's already been cleansed. But he says, as a testimony to them. To who? To the priest, to the ones who are judging, those who would have been making this call. He says, go tell no one, but show yourself to the priests as a testimony to them. But then what always happened. In verse 15, yet the news about him spread all the more, so that crowds of people came to hear him and to be healed of their sickness. So even though Jesus would tell the demon-possessed man, don't tell anyone, it would leak. Somebody would get that information out, and pretty soon you'd have all of these people coming for healing. In this instance, the same thing happens. I don't know if it was somebody else that had seen it, if it was the man himself. It was the priests might have spread the word. Somebody told what had happened, and the crowds began to come in. I mean, it makes sense, right? You're healing. You're bringing somebody back to their good health. And don't you want other people to know that? I mean, insider trading is a real thing. Why is that? Because all of a sudden you see this wonderful opportunity and you have to share it with somebody. So you call up your best friend and say, hey, go buy some stock in whatever. And that's because we want to share the good news. Of course, that's illegal. But the reason it happens is because we want other people to benefit from this. We want to share those things. And so that happens over and over again. What I'm trying to get to here is the fact that these are all good things. Jesus was healing. Jesus was restoring people. Jesus was forgiving their sins. People were gaining a new life. And those are good things. But why did he not want everybody to know? Because he knew that he would be bombarded with all of this stuff. And the next verse tells us why. It says in verse 16, but Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Jesus recognized something. He recognized a need that he had. That need was to get alone with the Father, to have prayer time, to have quiet time, to study, to think, to listen, to pray, to talk to his Father. And we look at that and we think, oh, wait a minute, isn't he God? Couldn't he have done that any time? Couldn't he have done that any place? Why would Jesus need to do that? But I want to flip that question around. And I want to ask you, if that was important to him, how much more important should it be to us? For us to look at opportunities to get away, to spend time with God, to talk to him, and to listen for his answers, to ask him for help. The story of the leper is a very important part of God's ministry, Jesus' ministry to these people, in that he is healing and he's helping people. When we look at our lives, is it important for us to help other people? Absolutely. I mean, that's brings joy to our life to help people. It helps them. It helps us. There's lots of benefits that come out of that. But if we get in our lives so busy that we're just busy all the time, can you see how we would lose that relationship with God that he desires to have with us? We get so busy that we don't have time to listen to him, to hear his word, to spend time meditating on his message for us. If we miss out on that, we would also miss out on other things, other benefits that he has for us. Jesus, in many times throughout the New Testament, we will see throughout the Gospels that he would pull away, that he would go up into the mountains, that he would separate himself from others, and he would get with God. And it was important to him to do that. In a few minutes, we're going to be singing the song, Burdens Are Lifted at Calvary. The idea that when we gather together with him and we meet with him in person, we are giving an opportunity for him to share with us, to help us, to guide us, give us wisdom, give us understanding. And that's all part of what his goal is for us. Is he wants his Spirit to work in us. He wants his Spirit to guide us and direct us. But how can you do that if we are not making ourselves available. In the same way, when speaking of the song, Burdens of Calvary, how can God lift our burdens? How can He lighten our load if we don't come to Him with those issues? And unlike Jesus when He was here in the physical body, God is not limited by time, by energy, by human limitations that Jesus was when He was walking on this earth. He is available for us 24/7, 365 days a year. He's always available for us, and He always has time for us. So when we're looking for help, when we're looking for encouragement, for being able to share the needs that we have, God wants us to share those things. He is asking us to bring those things to Him so that He can help carry that load. So as we look at the story in Luke chapter 5, we see that Jesus is always willing to help, and always loves, and always cares, and is always compassionate. That's all part of His story, of everything that He does. But He's also always making sure that He has time with the Father. And that is also very important. And the challenge that I have for you today is to make sure that we're doing that. To make sure that we are setting aside those times to be with Him and to listen to Him and to let Him be a part of it. If there's something that you have on your heart, something that has maybe separated you from God, not allowed you to be able to surrender to Him, to be in His presence, I want to challenge you to think about this as if you were the leper. What is it that's keeping us from the Father? What is it that keeps us from being able to pour out our needs, our wants, our desires to Him? Is it we're too busy? Is it that maybe we have sin in our lives and we tell ourselves that God couldn't possibly forgive me because I'm too bad? How do you feel like the leper would have felt coming to Jesus and throwing himself down at the feet and saying, I know that I'm unworthy, but if you are willing, you can heal me. And Jesus says, I am willing. No matter where you're at, no matter what circumstances you find yourself in, God is always wanting you to come to Him. He always desires that relationship. If other things have gotten in the way, if we've gotten too busy or other things have clouded our judgment, Satan wants to discourage us. He wants to tear us down. He wants us to keep from having that relationship with Him. If that's the case, I would invite you to come today and give your life to Him, to surrender to Him.